Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. You know how you guys keep asking for more practical stuff? Well, today we're diving deep into something you specifically requested, authenticity. Like how to actually be more authentic, not just talk about it.
And I brought my action boots.
Uh-huh. Love it. But seriously, it can feel kind of overwhelming, right? Like where do you even begin?
Right.
Luckily, we've got a ton of sources to help us break it down. Articles, research, even some personal stories that are so insightful.
Yeah, it's not just about feeling good. It's about making those tough choices that really reflect who you are, even when it's hard.
Exactly. And you know what's cool? Our sources actually break authenticity down into 5 key areas. You've got professional life, family dynamics, friendships, your faith, and even how you engage with society as a whole.
You know what I find fascinating?
What's that?
It's how we put these areas in separate boxes, you
Right.
know? Like we can be totally ourselves with friends, but then struggle at work.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. Like it's almost like we're wearing different masks depending on where we are, which actually you mentioned feeling kind of stuck in your work life.
Yeah.
Should we start there? I bet a lot of people listening can relate to that feeling of like pressure to conform, especially at work.
Oh, absolutely. One of the sources I found really interesting, it highlighted this study, and it actually found a direct link between feeling fake at work and getting super stressed and burned out.
Wow. That's not really surprising, but like it's kind of validating to see the research back it up. So, okay, what can we actually do about it?
Okay, so the first thing, and this comes up a lot, is getting crystal clear on your values.
Right, values, values, values. Everyone's always saying that, but how do you like actually figure out what your values are?
It's more than just a vague sense of what's important to you. It's
Yeah.
about getting specific about what matters to you in your career.
Okay, I like where this is going.
So one source suggested this exercise. It's really interesting, actually, where you imagine you just got offered your dream job, but it requires you to compromise one of your core
Oh,
values.
that's good.
Yeah.
So it's like, what would be an absolute deal breaker for you, even if it was like the perfect job on paper?
Yeah, exactly. Would you be willing to sacrifice your creativity to have more stability? Would you give up work-life balance for a fancy title?
Oh, I see. So it forces you to get really real about what you're not willing to budge on,
Yeah.
which then shows you what you truly value.
Exactly. And once you've got those non-negotiables, it makes those tough decisions so much easier.
Okay, so it's like you've got this internal compass that can guide you through those tricky situations. That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
But what about those times when you have to compromise? Like sometimes there's just no perfect solution, right?
Yeah.
Like how do you stay authentic when you're stuck between a rock and a hard place?
That's where honest communication comes in. And again, this is something that's highlighted over and over in our sources.
So speaking up about your concerns, setting boundaries, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and owning your mistakes. One source had this great quote. I loved it. Transparency, even when it feels scary, builds trust in a way that being perfect never can.
It's so true. It's like we're all going to mess up sometimes, but it's how we deal with it that shows our true character.
Right.
Okay, so we've got clarifying values and honest communication as these big pieces of being authentic at work. What else did the research mention?
You know, one thing that really stood out to me was leading with empathy.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's about understanding that everyone's going through their own stuff with their own challenges and their own dreams.
So like instead of judging that colleague who's maybe struggling or making different choices,
Hmm.
we try to see things from their perspective.
Exactly. And this applies to how we treat ourselves too. You mentioned earlier about feeling like you're not being creative enough at work. Are you allowing yourself to explore those creative outlets outside of work?
Hmm. You know, that's a good point. I do tend to put a lot of pressure on myself to be on all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to be a little kinder to myself and just allow myself some space to just be.
Yeah, and that is self-empathy in action.
This is making me realize that this whole authenticity thing,
Mhm.
it's not just about how we interact with other people. It's also about how we treat ourselves.
You're so right. And that actually comes up in all 5 areas, but it's especially important when it comes to family.
Ooh, family.
Yeah.
Talk about a whole other level of complexity when it comes to being authentic.
Yeah.
We're talking about people who have known us literally our whole lives. The good, the bad, the embarrassing childhood photos.
The whole shebang.
So how do you even begin to like untangle all of that? Where do you draw the line between being true to yourself and like respecting your family's expectations?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's something our sources really wrestled with. But one thing they all agreed on was that authenticity with family, it starts with a willingness to be transparent.
So that's kind of similar to what we talked about in the workplace.
Yeah.
But I imagine it gets way more personal and potentially messy when it's family.
Oh, for sure. It's not just about, griping about your boss. It's about being open about your feelings, your needs, your hopes and dreams, even the stuff that's hard to talk about.
Okay, but is there a risk of oversharing? Like, do we really need to tell our parents every single detail of our lives?
That's where boundaries come in. And remember, we talked about those at work, too.
Right.
They're crucial in family dynamics as well.
So it's about finding that balance between being open and honest without, like, crossing any lines or making anyone uncomfortable.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that even though we're super close to our families, we're still individuals with our own experiences and perspectives.
You know, this reminds me of something our sources mentioned about embracing imperfection both in ourselves and our families.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in that whole perfect family image that we
Yeah.
see, on social media or whatever.
Oh, totally. And that pressure to conform to this ideal can actually be super damaging.
So how do we break free from that?
Yeah.
How do we create a space where it's okay to be authentic, even if it's messy and complicated?
One source put it so well. Authenticity in families, it's not about putting on a show. It's about creating a space where everyone feels safe to be themselves, flaws and all.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
It just takes the pressure off, right?
Yeah,
It's about accepting each other for who we are, not who we think we should be.
100%. This conversation about imperfection and acceptance, it's making me think about friendships too.
Oh, yeah.
Because aren't those relationships all about choosing to be around people who let us be our true selves?
That is such a great point. Our sources actually talked about friendships as being this crucial testing ground for authenticity.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In what way?
Well, think about it. In friendships, we're not bound by the same expectations that come with family or work.
That's true. We choose our friends and they choose us.
Right. It's a totally different dynamic.
There's a freedom in that.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
that freedom, it lets us experiment with different parts of ourselves.
Yeah.
We try on different hats and see what feels right.
So it's like a safe space to figure out who we are and what we want from our relationship.
Exactly. And because of that, our sources really stress the importance of honesty and vulnerability in friendships.
Okay, but how much honesty is too much honesty? Like, is there ever a time when it's better to just, bite your tongue and avoid conflict?
That is a great question. And to be honest, it's something that even our sources debated. Some argue that real authenticity, it demands total transparency,
Even if it hurts?
even if it's hard.
Wow.
But others emphasize balancing honesty with compassion and empathy, you know?
So it's not just about blurting out whatever pops into your head. It's about thinking about how your words might affect the other person
Right.
and choosing to communicate in a way that's both honest and kind.
Exactly. It's about being considerate of their feelings and picking your battles.
Right, because you can be honest without being brutal. You can express your needs and boundaries without attacking the other person.
Totally. And don't forget, honest communication goes both ways. It's just as important to really listen to your friends.
Oh my gosh, that's such a good point. I am so guilty of getting caught up in my own head and forgetting to actually listen.
It happens, but active listening is so powerful for building authentic relationships. It shows your friend that you really see them and hear them.
So how do we get better at that? Any tips from the experts?
One source I read recommended putting away all distractions, your phone, your laptop, even your mental to-do list. Just focus on the speaker, their words, their body language, their tone of voice.
That sounds so simple, but I bet it makes a world of difference.
It really does. And when you combine that deep listening with honest, heartfelt communication, that's when the magic happens. That's where real connection and intimacy come from.
Okay, I'm taking notes.
All right.
So we've got honesty and active listening as these core pieces of authentic friendships. What else did the research highlight?
They also talked about accepting each other's differences because, let's be real, no two friends are exactly alike.
Right. We all have different backgrounds, different beliefs, different interests.
Right. Like you might love going to concerts, but your best friend might prefer quiet nights and reading a book.
Oh, that's me and my best friend to a T. And that's okay.
Exactly. Authentic friendships, they embrace those differences. They celebrate that variety.
It's about appreciating each other's uniqueness and seeing it as a strength rather than a weakness.
Beautifully said. Building on that, our sources also talk about supporting each other's growth.
Yeah.
Because true friends, they want to see each other succeed, even if that means taking different paths or chasing different dreams.
Absolutely. It's about celebrating each other's wins, offering a shoulder to cry on during setbacks, and just being there through thick and thin as we each navigate our own journeys.
You put it perfectly. It's that unwavering support and belief in each other, even when we doubt ourselves.
You know, this whole conversation about friendships, it's got me thinking about another area where authenticity can be both really challenging and really rewarding. Faith.
That's a great transition. Faith is often seen as something super personal and sometimes even sensitive.
Absolutely. And I want to be clear right up front that we're not here to preach or push any specific beliefs on anyone.
Right. Our goal is to explore how these principles of authenticity apply to this part of life, no matter your faith or spiritual background.
Exactly. And one of the most interesting things that our sources brought up was this idea of really examining your beliefs, like asking yourself, are these truly my beliefs? Or did I just inherit them from my family, my culture, society?
Ooh, that can be a tough question to face.
Right. It's like going deep into your own programming.
Yeah,
But I think it's so important to be honest with ourselves about where our beliefs come from.
absolutely. Because authenticity and faith, it's not about blindly accepting what we've been told. It's about seeking understanding, exploring different viewpoints, and coming to our own truth.
It's about owning your faith journey rather than just going through the motions.
Exactly. And that process of questioning and searching it can actually strengthen our faith and make us feel more connected to something bigger than ourselves.
I love that. It's like when we actively engage with our beliefs, they become more meaningful.
They become a part of us. And that's where the action and authenticity in action really kicks in.
So it's not just about what we believe, but how we live those beliefs in our daily lives.
Absolutely. Our sources emphasize aligning our actions with our values, whether that's through acts of kindness, compassion, generosity, whatever speaks to you.
So walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. And that consistency, that's what builds trust, both in ourselves and with others.
It's like when our actions match our words, we create this sense of integrity and authenticity that people can feel.
You got it. And you know what? This also applies to how we interact with the world around us.
Which brings us to our final area of exploration. Societal authenticity.
Done.
I know, right? This one feels big. Like, how do you even define authenticity when you're talking about something as complex as society?
It's a great question, and I think it's important to acknowledge that societal authenticity, it's going to look different for everyone.
Right. It's not about fitting into some mold. It's about finding ways to engage with the world in a way that feels true to you.
Exactly. And that might mean speaking up against injustice, supporting causes you believe in, or just making choices in your everyday life that reflect your values.
So it's about finding your own voice
Yeah.
and using it to make a difference no matter how big or small.
Yes. And realizing that we all have a role to play in creating a more just and fair world.
This whole conversation is making me realize that authenticity, it's so much more than just a nice idea. It's a force for change in our own lives and in the world.
It really is. And we're going to keep exploring that as we dive into the 4 key steps for embracing authenticity in action.
Ooh, I can't wait. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface. But before we move on, anything that stood out to you so far?
You know what really resonates with me is this idea that authenticity, it's a journey, not a destination. It's not about reaching some perfect state of being. It's about always evolving and growing.
I love that.
Yeah.
It takes the pressure off.
Right.
We don't have to be perfect. We just have to keep learning and growing.
Exactly. And it makes the journey so much more interesting.
Well said.
Okay.
All right, are you ready to unpack those 4 key steps?
I am so ready. Let's unlock the secrets to authentic living. Okay, so are you ready to unpack these universal steps to living a more authentic life? Like, we've talked about how this plays out in different areas, but now let's get practical. How do you actually make it happen?
Yeah. I am so here for the practical stuff. Like, I feel like we've already had some light bulb moments just talking through,
Yeah.
work, family, friendships, but now I'm ready for like the how-to guide.
Okay, perfect. So step number 1, and almost all of our sources emphasize this, is self-awareness,
Okay.
which sounds super simple, right?
Yeah.
But it's actually pretty deep.
We talked about like clarifying values in the workplace.
Yep.
Is that kind of what you mean by self-awareness?
That's a great example, but goes even deeper than that. It's about understanding like your motivations, your fears, even like your weird little quirks.
Okay.
Why do you react certain ways in certain situations? What are your blind spots?
Ooh, that's a lot to unpack. Like, where do you even begin with all of that?
One source suggested keeping a journal, but like specifically for tracking your emotional responses throughout the day.
Right.
Not just like what happened, but how did it make you feel?
Oh,
And you start to see patterns.
I like that. I've tried journaling before, but I never thought about focusing on the emotional patterns.
Yeah.
It's like Becoming a scientist of your own inner world.
Exactly. And the more you understand those patterns, the more choices you have about how you respond rather than just, reacting on autopilot.
I can already see how this ties into like being more authentic at work with family.
Yeah.
It's like self-awareness is the foundation for everything else.
Yes, you got it. And that brings us to step number 2, honest communication. And this came up in every single area we talked about, which tells you something right.
It's got to be important.
Ah.
But I'm curious because our sources seem to have different opinions on how honest we should be. Like, is there ever a time when a little white lie is okay?
That's a tough one. And I don't think there's like a simple answer. One of the researchers we read actually specializes in the ethics of communication, and they argue that even small lies, they erode trust over time.
Hmm. But what about those situations where the truth could really hurt someone's feelings or like even put you at risk?
That's where it gets really tricky.
Yeah.
This researcher suggests focusing on your intent. Like, are you trying to protect someone? Are you trying to protect yourself? Is there a way to be truthful but also kind?
So maybe instead of gushing over a friend's haircut that you secretly hate, you could say something like, "It's so great you found a style that makes you feel confident."
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're being truthful about your friend's positive feelings without compromising your own sense of authenticity.
Whoa, this is making me rethink some of my recent interactions. I might need to do some damage control.
Well, hey, that's what this deep dive is all about, right? Actionable steps. But remember, honest communication isn't just about what you say, it's also about how you listen.
That's true. I just caught myself like thinking about what I wanted to say next instead of actually absorbing what you were sharing.
We've all been there. But active listening is like a superpower when it comes to building authentic relationships. It shows the other person that you really see them, you hear them.
So how do we get better at that? Any tips from the experts?
One source recommended putting away all distractions like your phone, your laptop, even that mental to-do list, and just focus on the speaker. Their words, their body language, their tone of voice.
Okay, so simple, but I bet it's so powerful.
It is. And when you combine that deep listening with honest, heartfelt communication, that's where real connection happens. That's where intimacy comes from.
Okay, I am taking notes. Self-awareness, honest communication. What's next on this authenticity ladder?
This one might be the most challenging, but it's also the most rewarding. Courage.
Ooh, I can see how that would be both exciting and terrifying at the same time. What exactly do we need courage for on this journey?
Well, think about it. Being authentic often means going against the grain. It means standing up for what you believe in, even when it's unpopular or risky.
Like that example you gave about speaking up about a social issue, even if it means facing backlash.
Exactly. Or setting boundaries with family members who are used to getting their way. Or pursuing a creative passion that other people might not understand.
I'm realizing that courage isn't just about like grand gestures. It's also about those smaller everyday choices that require us to be true to ourselves even when it feels uncomfortable.
You're so right. It takes courage to say no when you're feeling pressured, to walk away from a toxic relationship, to admit you were wrong.
It's about choosing integrity over comfort, authenticity over approval.
Beautifully said. And here's the thing about courage. The more you practice it, the easier it gets. It's like a muscle.
Ooh, I like that.
You got to work it out.
So let's say I'm working on building my courage muscles. What's the final step that helps put it all together?
The final step, and this is where it all comes full circle, is consistency.
Consistency. I feel like that's one of those words you hear a lot in self-help land. What does it actually mean when we're talking about authenticity?
It means aligning your actions with your values day in and day out, even when nobody's watching.
So it's not just about having like a moment of clarity or burst of courage. It's about making those authentic choices consistently over time.
Exactly. Think of it like building a house. Self-awareness is the foundation. Honest communication is the framework. Courage is the energy that gets it built. And consistency is what makes it sturdy, makes it livable.
Ooh, I like that analogy. But let's be real. No one's perfect. What about those times when we slip up, when we make choices that aren't really in line with our values?
That's where self-compassion comes in.
Okay.
We're all works in progress. The key is to notice those slip-ups without judgment, learn from them, and get back on track.
So it's not about beating ourselves up. It's about using those experiences as opportunities to learn and grow.
Exactly. Authenticity, it's not about reaching some perfect state of being. It's about always striving to be more aligned with who you truly are.
I love that. It takes the pressure off. Okay, I feel like I'm finally starting to wrap my head around this whole authenticity in action thing.
Right.
We've got the 4 steps. Self-awareness, honest communication, courage, and consistency. But how do we actually put this into practice in our daily lives?
That is the question, isn't it? And it's something we'll explore more deeply as we wrap up this deep dive. But for now, I encourage you to think about these 4 steps and consider which one really resonates with you right now.
Yeah, and maybe even identify one small action you can take today that aligns with that step.
Exactly. It could be as simple as setting aside 5 minutes to journal about your feelings, or having a difficult conversation you've been putting off, or saying yes to something that scares you but also excites you.
I love that. Small steps, big impact. It's all about making those consistent choices that move us closer to our most authentic selves.
Well said. All right, ready for the final part of our deep dive? I can't wait to share some final thoughts and insights that might just spark a little revolution in your life.
Okay, deep divers, we're back, and I am so ready to wrap up our exploration of authenticity in action. We've covered a lot today, from work to family to friendships to even our faith
Yeah.
and how we engage with the world around us.
Phew, yeah. And through it all, we've uncovered these 4 powerful tools: self-awareness, honest communication, courage, and consistency. They really are like the essential ingredients for a more authentic life, no matter what your individual goals or challenges might be.
You know what's really striking me is how interconnected these 4 steps are. It's like they build on each other, creating this upward spiral of growth and self-discovery.
I love that upward spiral image. And it's so true. The more self-aware you become, the more honest you can be in your communication. And the more honest you are, the more courage you'll have to set boundaries and make choices that truly reflect your values. And then all of that is amplified by consistency, those small everyday actions that reinforce your commitment to authenticity.
It's like the amazing positive feedback loop. The more you practice, the easier it becomes and the more fulfilling your life feels.
Exactly. And I think that's what's so exciting about this whole concept of authenticity in action. It's not just some vague philosophical idea, it's a set of practical tools that we can use to actually create real change in our lives.
For our listener who's been with us on this journey today, what's the one key takeaway you want them to walk away with?
I think the most important thing to remember is that authenticity, it's a process, not a destination. It's not about achieving some perfect state of being. It's about constantly striving to be more aligned with who you truly are.
I love that. It takes the pressure off, right?
Yeah.
Like we don't have to have it all figured out. We just have to
Yeah.
be willing to keep learning and growing and making choices that feel true to us.
Exactly. And it's okay to mess up along the way. In fact, those mess ups, those are often our greatest teachers.
So true. They show us where we need to grow, where we need to set stronger boundaries, where we need to be more compassionate with ourselves and with others.
Absolutely. So embrace the mess, embrace the imperfections, and just keep moving forward on your own unique path to authenticity.
You know, we've talked a lot about the individual benefits of living authentically, but our sources also emphasize this ripple effect that authenticity can have on the world around us.
Yes, it's like that quote, be the change you wish to see in the world. It all starts with us.
Totally. When we have the courage to be ourselves, to speak our truth, to live in alignment with our values, we inspire others to do the same.
Right. It's like this chain reaction of authenticity. One person's courage can give someone else permission to step into their own truth.
And the more people who embrace authenticity, the more compassionate, understanding and just our world becomes.
I love that thought.
So if you're listening to this and you're feeling that spark of inspiration, that desire to be more authentic in your own life, where do you even begin?
I'd say go back to those 4 steps we talked about: self-awareness, honest communication, courage, and consistency. And ask yourself which one feels the most important for you to focus on right now.
And then what's one tiny action you can take today that aligns with that step? It could be as simple as writing down 3 things you're grateful for, or having that tough conversation you've been putting off, or maybe saying yes to something that kind of scares you but also lights you up inside.
Even the tiniest step can set amazing things in motion.
Right. It's all about those consistent choices that help us become our most authentic selves.
So go out there and be your amazing authentic selves. The world needs your unique voice, your perspective, your contribution.
Yes. And remember, this deep dive, this is just the beginning. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep growing into the most authentic versions of yourselves. We'll be back next week with a brand new deep dive. Until then, happy exploring.